Welcome to Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, the show that will dissect critical policy issues, explore the art of advocacy and politics, and share insights on how to make your voice heard in today's ever-changing political landscape. I'm your host, John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Business Council of Westchester. As Westchester County's largest business membership organization that focuses on advocacy and economic development, on behalf of our members and the Westchester business community, the changing energy landscape has been one of the BCW's top legislative priorities for years. We've watched, we've weighed in on what the new laws have been implemented through the state legislature, and obviously have raised what we think are legitimate and serious concerns regarding the CLCPA, which just marked its 5th anniversary. That's the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Our guest today, Dan Singer, the president of Robison, is one of the leaders in not just Westchester County, but New York State on how we are going to build this new renewable energy infrastructure. Let me tell you a little bit about Dan. He is the president of Robison, the Hudson Valley's leading home comfort and energy service company, with nearly 200 employees. The company, based in Portchester, New York, serves more than 24,000 homes and businesses in Westchester and Putnam counties. Dan is an energy expert who has appeared on WNBC, WCBS TV, and other media to share his expertise in the home energy industry. He is a 1989 graduate of Syracuse University, where he studied industrial labor relations and political science. In addition to being president of Robison, Dan is the regional vice president of the Empire State Energy Association. Dan, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for
having me. We're going to talk a lot about the leadership role that we at the BCW have actually asked you to really take part of in creating our new Westchester Clean Energy Action Coalition. But before we get to that, I had mentioned the CLCPA and the goals that were set forth by then Governor Cuomo and the state legislature when it was adopted over 5 years ago. Can you give us a little overview of your interpretation of the CLCPA?
Sure. I mean, the CLCPA is, as the name implies, is trying to lead the way in changing the impact that we have on the climate. And in a very admirable way, the state is laying out the goals and the objectives and the targets to hit before they have a plan to hit it, which is, again, admirable because it makes sure that everybody's feet are held to the fire. And then the challenge now is, how do you get there in a way that is both achieves the goals, is cost palatable to the end user and to the economy, and in a way that both residential homeowners and business owners can wrap their heads around and wrap their arms around and be able to adopt in a way that that is implementable in the time frame that's laid out before us.
Well, and again, I think one of the concerns that we have raised and will continue to raise is, again, the implementation dates that they set for carbon-free emissions for the state. For both, they had goals for 2030 and then also for 2040. And because we have not yet been able to build that renewable energy infrastructure, many of us said, let's take a breath. Let's have an honest conversation on how we can achieve what the goals of the legislation want to do, which we all are in favor of, but do it in a way that is going to make sure that we don't have a reliability issue and that we don't have a cost issue that's going to be put on the burdens of New York taxpayers. What are some of the things that you have seen that can help us move in that direction?
Well, before we even talk about the technology, I think one of the things that you mentioned, which I and we at Robison believe is really part of the dialogue, you need to honestly come to the process. There are those amongst us, there are those people that put up barriers to the change, which some of whom might be climate deniers or just change adverse or just don't want to see the change come. And I don't consider them to be, honest players in getting to the ultimate solution. At the same time, there are those that are trying to ensure that we achieve the goals, but sometimes are closed-minded to the array of solutions that are potentially out there to help us get to the ultimate goals. So right now, it is about electrify everything. which is, again, admirable. You and I have spoken outside of this context about, is the grid ready to handle that type of demand? What is the cost implications of that grid? And even if the grid could handle the demand, are we at a point where our electricity grid truly is carbon neutral, or would we be dependent upon carbon-producing electricity generation to get there? And if you take all of those obstacles for what they are, and they are just obstacles that we need to overcome, is it worth exploring other technologies that might be able to produce at least bridges and help us lower our carbon footprint and lower the emissions of greenhouse gases while we continue to solve the problems I was just mentioning?
You're listening to Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, part of the BCW Podcast Network. Our guest this afternoon is Dan Singer, who's the president of Robison. Dan, you spoke at the BCW's annual energy conference earlier in the year, and you really laid out in layman's terms, which I think is so important because, as you said, we need to educate communities now on what's real and what's not real when we talk about all of the different renewable energy and alternative sources of energy. Mm-hmm. What are some of the key areas that you and your team have really been focusing on to your customers as well as to the region as well?
How much time do we have? Like I was saying before, we view the solution we don't think there's one magic bullet, right? This is going to take almost a cocktail of solutions to really come up with something we're going to, that we'll ultimately get there with. We're really proud of the initiatives that we've taken to help a lot of our customers, both commercial properties, multifamily properties, but particularly private homes, in converting their homes to heat pumps to either augment their fossil fuel or to replace their fossil fuel. Those heat pumps are sometimes air source heat pumps and geothermal heat pumps. And a lot of people look at me funny sometimes too, knowing that our company has a 100-year history delivering and servicing fossil fuels. But we look at ourselves as a provider whose responsibility it is to keep people comfortable in their homes in a way that achieves their personal goals. So it might be the cost might be a higher priority for a customer. Environmental impact might be most important to a customer. Efficiency and overall cost could be important in terms of how efficient the home can raise and lower temperature. And again, we focus on cooling and heating. So we're really proud of the steps we've taken with different partners that are installing geothermal heat pumps and the heat pumps that we've installed. But
can we just stop you there? Because I think, just again, as we're trying to educate our listeners too, when you say geothermal and you say air pumps, they're two separate and different type of programs. Can you just give us a brief overview?
Sure, and stop me if I get too wonky or too technical on this stuff. But generally speaking, a heat pump is moving, through the excitement of a gas, refrigerant gas. That as the gas, expands when it gets excited, it creates some displacement, and it can move heat in one direction or another. And in the summertime, it's looking to pump heat out of the house and remove humidity from the house, which lets the house be cooler, and it's basically reversing the process and moving the warm air into the house that it's literally extracting from the outside air that it's moving into the house. Think of your refrigerator that keeps everything cold inside your house, but you can always feel the warm air blowing out the back of it. And same thing with your traditional air conditioning. That's an air source heat pump. The ground source heat pump is amazing technology, and it's been around. The technology itself has been around for a long time, but only now is becoming really scalable, where you're taking advantage of the constant temperature that is the earth beneath us. So if you dig down in the earth, more than 8 or 10 feet, it's always a constant 55 degrees. It's actually rather amazing. So if you're taking water or a liquid and you're moving it down through a pipe that is just running in a loop in the ground, that water that could be going down into the ground at 40-something degrees will always come back up at 55 degrees. And that change in temperature creates the energy that can ultimately excite a refrigerant gas that does the same process I was just describing. Some of the newer technology that we've been working with, some of it is what I just described, using a PVC pipe that goes into the ground, typically about 150 feet of loop. There's newer technology out there now that rather than transferring water through the ground and coming back up at a different temperature to excite the gas, taking the gas itself and looping it in the ground through copper piping, and it's changing in temperature as it's going through the ground. And when it comes back up into the heat exchanger, the gas is already in an excited state, and it's doing its process. And it is virtually limitless because the temperature below the ground is never going to change. And it doesn't care what the temperature is outside. It doesn't care if it's snowing, if it's raining, if it's windy, or whatever's going on. The ground source heat pump is a very reliable way to do it. It's also expensive.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we have to, again, when we say have honest conversations, not only with our elected officials, but with citizens in New York State and businesses as well. You mentioned, again, those two examples of the air pump and the geothermal pump. As we try to remove these obstacles to move forward to build this infrastructure, denial is going to be, I think, one of our biggest challenges. People are going to say, "Hey, I don't want to make a change. I don't need to make a change." Mm-hmm. How do we move that needle to get them to understand? Yes, first of all, it's going to be the law in one shape or form, but how do we begin to get people to know that if they buy into this, yes, there might be some sticker shock, but at the end of the day, we're going to get that carbon-free emission goals that we all want to see happen.
Well, so part of it is if you're talking to a homeowner and they're thinking, is now the time to do it, or the price is going to come down on the technology, as we see in everything in our lives, right? We all have smartphones and computers and cars that have different technology in them, and technology tends to bring prices down. However, right now there is a very robust incentive and rebate program, both from the state and in the form of tax credits through the IRA, that make now a very interesting time to do it, where those rebates and incentives may not be there down the road. So whether or not you're a believer or not, the policymakers are kind of saying you can do it whenever you want. It's your choice if you want to do it with the carrot or you want to do it with the stick. Because once the cap and invest regimen comes into play on fossil fuels and on carbon emitting fuels, it's basically going to serve as a carbon tax. And the more that you're using carbon, they won't. It's the more expensive the carbon-based fuels become as a result of effectively a tax regimen, the less they need to provide rebates to incentivize you to consider other options, because it's just going to become cost compelling because of how expensive the fossil fuels are. But there is another alternative, and I don't know if this is what you're thinking in your question. The other thing that we're spending a lot of time and energy on, pun intended, is other ways that we can retrofit and help people reduce or even eliminate their impact without having to change the equipment in their homes. Right now, any homeowner that buys their fuel oil from Robison, whether they like it or not, is getting a product that's mixed with 20% biofuels, made from renewables, biomass. We use domestically produced soybean oil. There's other products on the market that do it, and we are participating with a number of research outlets that are looking to increase those blends to ultimately 50% before 2030, and ultimately burn a completely renewable product, which needs very modest modifications of the home heating equipment to be able to use even in what they refer to as a RD100, a renewable diesel 100%. It's a very limited adjustments that need to be made. I mean, literally hundreds of dollars worth of some fittings changes. All of the manufacturers of all of the oil heating equipment are now producing equipment that is compliant with 100% biofuel and 100% renewable diesel. The issue is, what do we do with people with some older equipment? And just to, what we've been finding, we try to lead with a full electrification solution. If we can help a homeowner kind of no longer be burdened by fossil fuels, fantastic. What we know also in Westchester, especially south of 287, but really throughout the county, we have a lot of older homes that don't necessarily have the ductwork in the house that can move the warm or cool air around as efficiently as systems. Some people don't want to have the eyesore. As a solution to that problem, you could go with these ductless systems, these mini split systems that probably everybody has seen somewhere. They hang as a cassette on the wall. But some people are just aesthetically averse to having these different wall hanging units, and the existing ductwork in their house isn't large enough to accommodate the velocity needed to be able to deliver heat throughout the house. And in those situations, either that or the rebate regimen isn't enough of an incentive to get them over the hump. Well, then we can offer them another alternative to help them reduce their carbon emissions through the form of biofuels that could, at a minimum, serve as a bridge to newer technologies that might be coming to deliver electric-produced heating and cooling, or it might ultimately be the solution. And that's we're trying to cover all the bases, if you will, to make sure that we can be an honest broker when we're speaking to one of our customers that can present all of the solutions to them and tailor the solution that's really right for that home or business.
Our guest is Dan Singer, who is the president of Robison. Dan, if our listeners wanted to learn more about Robison and the programs you supply, can you give your website and phone number?
Sure. Well, website's simple, robison.com or robisinoil.com, but any robisonsomething.com will probably get you there, but robison.com is the simplest. You can find us on all social media. Our main telephone number is 914-345-5700. But just clicking on our website, there's a link that links you right to the executive offices, which I monitor those emails myself every day, and I'd be happy to engage and answer any questions or discuss these topics with anybody.
Well, that's great. And again, as we said at the Business Council of Westchester, as we look to be a positive, proactive participant in this changing energy landscape and build this new renewable infrastructure, learning more about biofuel and other products are going to be so important. How do we, and again, this is probably an ongoing challenge that we're all going to face, how do we try to lower the, and I'll use the pun, temperature on folks who say, you know what, we can't have battery storage farms, we can't have solar farms in our communities because we've heard all of the science fiction type reasons why it's going to do damage to our physical being.
Yeah, there's always NIMBY, right? No one wants it in their backyard. Personally, and again, this may sound odd for somebody that grew up in the fossil fuels business. I've been driving an electric vehicle, a battery-powered vehicle, for a dozen years now, and love the performance and love the benefits of it. But again, struggle with that with what's going to happen to the battery in my car, but also the larger physical batteries that would function to service communities. If that's if I'm understanding what your question is. There is newer technology that's coming out that's just literally within 12 or 18 months away that is not lithium-based batteries, but newer technologies. I'm not going to profess to be a complete subject matter expert on the power storage components of it, but there's always going to be newer technologies. But as we look at that, people shouldn't wait because you can always wait. And there's always going to be newer technology. This is going to be, a cocktail of solutions, as I was saying before. I hope I've been responsive to your question because the notion of what is how do we solve the problem if people don't want to really see or feel the change is a challenge. We all need to embrace this because this is something. We all live on the planet. Whether or not we don't want it in our backyard, we're not talking about our backyards. We're talking about the planet. We're talking about our future. We're talking about the impact that we're all feeling through Canadian forest fires and extreme temperatures and potentially more active hurricane seasons. It's something that we can't ignore. And even those people that don't believe that there's a correlation between human behavior and those things, I would just challenge those people to think about what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong about your assumption that there isn't a correlation? We all need to take responsibility to make sure that we're erring on the side of protecting the planet, even if that means that we're going to have what might be an unsightly battery storage system in our neighborhood or somewhere in our town.
Well, and again, I think what's so important about this is, and we at the BCW, as we've raised questions about the CLCPA, we've always said we all believe in climate change. Mm-hmm. We know it's real. And again, you can bury your head in the sand, but that's not going to change the fact. Again, how we get to the goals of the CLCPA in a responsible way is, I think, really the key priority that we all need to continue to focus on. I just want to transition in the time we have left to talk about our new Clean Energy Action Coalition. And I like the title Clean Energy Action Coalition because we are going to be active. And one of the things that really excited me is we had our first meeting. You helped me moderate the meeting, but more importantly, we had leaders in all the different sectors that you've been touching on who want to work together.
Yeah.
They're not competing in the sense of now understanding that if we don't work together, we're not going to move the needle. So tell me a little bit about, what you think our coalition should really be focusing on. And the fact is that, again, we need to have these folks who are on the front lines really give them as much support as possible.
Yeah, it was a really exciting meeting. I share your excitement in assessing what that room was like. I mean, literally people from utilities and government positions to individuals that are literally the tip of the spear and installing solutions in businesses and homes. And it's great to kind of get that room together because, independently, any one of those solutions is not going to solve the problem. This is an orchestra that needs to be conducted a bit by a maestro, and I'm not saying that's you or me for sure, but it is a challenge to our public policy people, our government officials, to figure out how to be the proper maestro. And if I may, and I know that we're running low on time, that's where I really think brave leadership needs to come into play, because what has moved the needle, and to their credit, it is what's gotten us to the point where we've made everybody aware through policy that a change needs to happen. But the change is not one solution. And I was just describing to you earlier about some of the virtues of biofuels and renewable diesel and things like that. But as of right now, the regiment that seems to be that will be coming into play in the next 12 months, where there will be effectively a tax on heating oil, they have not yet said whether or not if you're using a percentage of renewable diesel or biofuel, whether or not that portion of your purchase will be exempted from it or not. So they're basically eliminating, because there is one man's interpretation, I'll give you my opinion, there is a very strong, effective lobby towards electrification. And there's a view that anything that stands in the way of full electrification of everything, is somehow a barrier to the change, when we feel it's actually the opposite. We are absolutely embracing electrification as a part of the solution. And in those circumstances where it is not the most viable solution for a homeowner, the homeowner should get credit, if you will, for efforts they're taking to help lower their carbon emissions and help us reach the goals of the CLCPA through other means other than those that have the ear of the policymakers.
Well, again, this changing energy landscape, this building of the new renewable infrastructure is going to be one of the BCW's top priorities as we move forward. And we're lucky to have a leader like Dan Singer, the president of Robison, who not only walks the walk but talks the talk in terms of, or vice versa, but really is now making sure that we get the most updated information on all the different technologies. So, Dan, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the role you are going to continue to play leading this new coalition that the BCW has started. And we got a lot of work to do, and we got a lot of educating to do, and we have a lot of misinformation that we need to try to get out of the way so that communities feel good about the future. And as you said, it is about the future. It's about all our futures, about our kids' futures, our grandchildren's future. We can't go back. We need to move forward. And having you play a role of that is going to be so important for the business community.
Yeah, and thank you for having me and giving us an opportunity to talk about this. But even more importantly, thank you, those that are listening and getting engaged and wanting to hear about the different elements that we'll all need to incorporate into the ultimate solution.
Yep, it's very important. This is John Ravitz, the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for the Business Council of Westchester. You've been listening to Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, part of the BCW Podcast Network. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll listen again to our next episode. Be sure to check out the BCW Podcast Network's expansive lineup of shows: Leadership Unleashed, What's Trending, the Member Spotlight, Win, the Innovation Roundtable, and Advocacy and Politics Unplugged. Stay tuned to our next episode of Advocacy and Politics Unplugged, premiering next month. The Business Council of Westchester is the county's largest business membership organization focusing on economic development and advocacy. With over 1,100 members, it is our mission to work for the profitability of our members and prosperity for the Westchester community. To learn more about the Business Council of Westchester, please go to www.thebcw.org.